The highest function of love is that it makes the loved one a unique and irreplaceable being. The unhappy person resents it when you try to cheer him up, because that means he has to stop dwelling on himself and start paying attention to the universe. Unhappiness is the ultimate form of self-indulgence. When you're unhappy, you get to pay a lot of attention to yourself. You get to take yourself oh so very seriously. A sense of humor is superior to any religion so far devised. Our individuality is all that we have. There are those who barter it for security, those who repress it for what they believe is the betterment of the whole society. But blessed in the twinkle of the morning star is the one who nurtures it and rides it in grace and love and wit, from peculiar station to peculiar station along life's bittersweet route. The beet is the melancholy vegetable, the one most willing to suffer. You can't squeeze blood out of a turnip. The beet is the murderer returned to the scene of the crime. The beet is what happens when the cherry finishes with the carrot. The beet is the ancient ancestor of the autumn moon, bearded, buried, all but fossilized. The dark green cells of the grounded moonboat, stitched with the veins of the primordial plasma. The kite string that once connected the moon to the earth, now a muddy whisker, drilling desperately for rubies. The beet was Rasputin's favorite vegetable. You could see it in his eyes. Never underestimate how much assistance, how much satisfaction, how much comfort, how much soul and transcendence there might be in a well-made taco and a cold bottle of beer. To diminish the worth of women, men had to diminish the worth of the moon. They had to drive a wedge between human beings and the trees and the beasts and the waters. Because trees and beasts and waters are as loyal to the moon as to the sun, they had to drive a wedge between thought and feeling. At first they used Apollo as the wedge, and the abstract logic of Apollo made a mighty wedge indeed. But Apollo, the artist, maintained a love for women, not the open, unrestrained lust that Pan has, but a controlled longing that undermined the patriarchal ambition. When Christ came along, Christ, who slept with no female, Christ, who played no musical instrument, recited no poetry, and never kicked up his heels by moonlight, this Christ was the perfect wedge. Christianity is merely a system for turning priestesses into handmaidens, queens into concubines, and goddesses into muses. To achieve the impossible, it is precisely the unthinkable that must be thought. If you lack the iron and the fuzz to take control of your life, if you insist on leaving your fate to the gods, then the gods will repay your weakness by having a grin or two at your expense. Should you fail to pilot your own ship, don't be surprised at what inappropriate port you find yourself docked. The dull and prosaic will be granted adventures that will dice their central nervous systems like an onion. Romantic dreamers will end up in the rope yard. You may protest that it is too much to ask of an uneducated 15-year-old girl that she defy her family, her society, her weighty cultural and religious heritage in order to pursue a dream that she doesn't really understand. Of course it is asking too much. The price of self-destiny is never cheap, and in certain situations, it is unthinkable. But to achieve the marvelous, it is precisely the unthinkable that must be thought. Breathe properly, stay curious, and eat your beets. Hold on to your divine blush, your innate rosy magic, or end up brown. Once you're brown, you'll find out you're blue as indigo. And you know what that means. Indigo, indigoing, indigon. It is better to be small, colorful, sexy, careless, and peaceful, like the flowers, than large, conservative, repressed, fearful, and aggressive, like the thunder lizards. A lesson, by the way, that the earth has yet to learn. The only bubble in the flat champagne of February is Valentine's Day. It was no accident that our ancestors pinned Valentine's Day on February's shirt. He or she, lucky enough to have a lover in frigid, antsy February, has cause for celebration indeed. There is plenty of misery in the world, all right, but there is ample pleasure as well. If a person forswears pleasure in order to avoid misery, what has he gained? How can you admire a human who consciously embraces the bland, the mediocre, and the safe, rather than risks the suffering that disappointments can bring? If desire causes suffering, it may be because we do not desire wisely, or that we are inexpert at obtaining what we desire. Why not get better at fulfilling desire? I cannot believe that the most delicious things were placed in here merely to test us or tempt us, to make it the more difficult for us to achieve the grand prize, the safety of the void. To fashion of life such a petty game is unworthy of both men and gods. Philosophers have argued for centuries about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, but materialists have known all along that it depends on whether they are jitterbugging or dancing cheek to cheek. Perhaps the most terrible or wonderful thing that can happen to an imaginative youth, aside from the curse or blessing of imagination itself, is to be exposed with preparation to the life outside his or her own sphere. The sudden revelation that there is a there out there. Louisiana in September was like an obscene phone call from nature. The air, moist, sultry, secretive, and far from fresh, felt as if it were being exhaled in one's face. Sometimes it even sounded like heavy breathing. Meet me incognito, baby. Incognito will have nothing to hide. The rich are the most discriminated against minority in the world, openly or covertly. Everybody hates the rich. Somebody has to love them. Sure, a lot of rich people are assholes, but believe me, a lot of poor people are assholes too. And an asshole with money can at least pay for his own drinks. When we accept small wonders, we qualify ourselves to imagine great wonders. The word desire suggests that there is something we do not have. If we have everything already, there can be no desire, for there is nothing left to want. I think that what the Buddha may have been trying to tell us is that we have it all, each of us, all the time. Therefore, desire is simply unnecessary. You know what I mean? Real and unreal, beautiful and strange, like a dream. It got me high as a kite, but it didn't last long enough. It ended too soon and left nothing behind. That's how it is with dreams, said Priscilla. They're the perfect crime. Salvation is for the feeble. That's what I think. I don't want salvation. I want life, all of life, the miserable as well as the superb. Sometimes it even sounded like heavy breathing. Honeysuckle, swamp flowers, magnolia, and the mystery smell of the river scented the atmosphere, amplifying the intrusion of the organic sleaze. It was an aphrodisiac and repressive, soft and violent at the same time. In New Orleans, in the French Quarter, miles from the barking lungs of alligators, the air maintained this quality of breath. Although here, it acquired a tinge of metallic halitosis due to fumes expelled by tourist buses, trucks delivering Dixie beer, and, on Decatur Street, a mass transit motor coach named Desire. He was becoming unstuck. He was sure of that. His bones were no longer wrapped in flesh, but in clouds of dust. In hummingbirds, dragonflies, and luminous moths. But so perfect was his equilibrium that he felt no fear. He was vast. He was many. He was dynamic. He was eternal. There is a comfort in conformity, a security in control that is appealing. There is a thrill in domination, and we are all secretly attracted to violence. The minute you land in New Orleans, something wet and dark leaps on you and starts humping you like a swamp dog in heat. And the only way to get that aspect of New Orleans off of you is to eat it off. If you don't eat day and night, if you don't constantly funnel the indigenous flavors into your bloodstream, then the mystery beast will go right on humping you, and you will feel its sordid presence rubbing against you long after you have left town. In fact, like any sex offender, it can leave permanent psychological scars. What bothers me today is the lack of, well, I guess you'd call it authentic experience. So much is a sham. So much is artificial, synthetic, watered down, and standardized. We're standardizing people, their goals, their ideas. The sham is everywhere. What is politics, after all, but the compulsion to preside over property and make other people's decisions for them? Liberty, the very opposite of ownership and control, cannot then result from political action, either at the polls or the barricades, but rather evolves out of attitude. If it results from anything, it may be levity. If civilization is ever going to be anything but a grandiose pratfall, anything more than a can of deodorizer in the shithouse of existence, the people are going to have to concern themselves with magic and poetry. Reality is subjective, and there's an unenlightened tendency in this culture to regard something as important only if it's sober and severe. Your cheerful dumb are not so much happy as lobotomized, but your gloomy smart are just as ridiculous. Humanity has advanced when it has advanced, not because it has been sober, responsible, and cautious, but because it has been playful, rebellious, and immature. Death is impatient and thoughtless. It barges into your room when you are right in the middle of something, and it doesn't bother to wipe its boots. I do not know why the dead do not come back to life. Perhaps death is so wonderful, in ways we cannot comprehend, that they prefer it over and above their friends and loved ones. Although I am inclined to doubt that be the case. I may be mad, he thought, but I prefer the shit of this world to whatever sweet ambrosias the next may offer. Birth and death were easy. It was life that was hard. I mean, the gods do not limit men. Men limit men. All dreams continue in the beyond.